Good evening and welcome to this special broadcast right here on NDTV 24/7. Now, for the past 1 week, we have been observing that the national education policy is in the midst of a massive controversy. You've got parties in Tamil Nadu particularly that are up in arms over one section of the education policy, that is the 3-language clause. It talks about, or was perceived as, making Hindi mandatory. Now, what is the case? You had the Kasturirangan committee, the chief himself coming out and saying, well, it has been misunderstood. What is the reality around this clause? Is this much ado about nothing? And how does the man himself plan, or the government for that matter, plan to allay those fears? At this moment, I also want to introduce NDTV's science editor, Pallav Bagla, with me. And we have the man of the moment who will have all the answers to this controversy, Krishnaswamy Kasturirangan. Pallav.
Dr. Kasturirangan, thanks a lot for joining us. It's been 30
Hello.
years since we had a education policy. What was the need for having a new education policy? Can you hear me, Dr. Rangan?
Well, yes, I'm able to do that. I should say, as you rightly said, Pallav, it has been 25 years since we had the last policy on education. Much has changed, not only in this country but across the world. I should say that the previous policy was adopted at a time when internet was yet to make a mark, and you know the impact of the internet at the present stage. It is virtually dominating several segments of the endeavors in the humankind. And education is no exception to this, in fact. And today the technology is becoming a very key element in the context of education, whether it is related to training of teachers, extending the education, enrichment of students, or even managing university systems and other educational systems. So there is a whole gamut of things on which technology is playing a role. The country in the last 25 years has also undergone a major transformation with respect to social, economic, strategic, the industrial, and so on and so forth. And there is this question of the oncoming fourth industrial revolution, which will demand its own unique requirements, particularly of the knowledge society that we are trying to create in this country. And of course, is also the sustainable development goals to which our education has to be tuned. So this to give you some few of the reasons why the time has come for us to relook at the education policy, give it a direction which is consistent with the demands of the 21st century, and also to make sure that the education becomes a very relevant ownership of the younger generation, and also so that the elder people, the older ones, also upgrade themselves in terms of the knowledge and prove themselves to be a useful component or a member of the society. So one can see the time is up. In fact, we should have done it even a little earlier, but I think better late than never. I think this policy addresses, these are the kind of concerns that this policy addresses, and tries to make sure that the nation has a policy which can be then adopted towards addressing these questions in the 21st
Dr.
century.
Rangan, does it prepare India, as the Prime Minister Narendra Modi wants, for a new India?
Definitely. In fact, I should say that the very first meeting we had with the minister, where just to tell the minister about our own ideas of doing this policy, the important thing he told me is, and the team itself, is that we need to have it for about next 20 years at least. This policy should be valid, and equally importantly, with fine tuning, it can even go up to 3 decades. So that is a kind of a direction that was given. So obviously the different elements we have addressed in this particular policy does conform to the major direction with regard to its utility in the coming 2 years, 20 years, and maybe even another 10 years.
Dr. Kasturirangan, I want to ask you, of course, you spoke about the reason why a new policy must exist, but one particular proposal has been a subject matter of huge political debate, particularly in the state of Tamil Nadu. I'm sure you're aware, you have also revised or amended the draft policy first of all, I want to know at this moment, does the NEP 2019 propose Hindi as a mandatory language or not? Because that is the crux of all the agitation that is taking place. Has Hindi been proposed as a mandatory language or not?
My answer is no.
So why this noise and why this hullabaloo?
Would you like to have an elaboration on that?
Yes,
I can
absolutely.
give you more of
Definitely.
it.
Absolutely,
But I can
Dr.
say this
Kasturirangan.
one word speaks volumes of what is the reaction from me.
Dr. Kasturirangan, the reason why we
Yes,
would want
please.
you to elaborate, because that paragraph, that contentious paragraph, and I have it right, is P5.4.9,
Okay.
which was later revised also. It led, many people would say, it led to a lot of confusion. So earlier on, it mentioned Hindi as a mandatory language, and then later in the amendment, there was no mention at all, thus creating more confusion. So we would love you to elaborate.
Okay. Okay, I will clarify that. I'll do that. First thing I would like to say is that we have the section on the language policy, which is a very comprehensive one. It is not only addressing with respect to the 3-language formula or the medium of instruction. The overall strategy of developing language as a knowledge base in this country from several aspects: regional language, local language, the questions of classical languages, and then the question of modern languages, the question of the kind of infrastructure that we need, the type of teachers that are needed. So you will see, if you carefully go through the section related to the language, the policies, and the powerful medium that it represents in terms of communication, is much more than this one aspect. That is number one, I would like to say. On this particular aspect, we have addressed the question with respect to the earlier language policies, because we knew that language is a sensitive issue. If there is some level of acceptability of a particular formula or a strategy, we didn't want to rock the boat. So that was very clear to us. So we had this 3-language formula. We went through the 3-language formula and this utility and its performance, and in the overall context of its acceptability at the country's level, even though definitely there will be small deviations in the adoption of this 3-language formula with different states, it's certainly there. So, but we thought, as a general approach, as a general recommendation of the policy, for the policy of language, we recommended a 3-language formula. The second thing, that modification that we brought is, if you really look at the 1968 language formula, it made Hindi mandatory for South Indian states. In fact, they have made it clear that besides the North Indian states learning English, Hindi, say Sanskrit, the non-English speaking areas will have, besides English and the local language, also Hindi to be learned. So that was the thing, and it was carried forward by 1986 policy as well as the 1992 improvement of the 1986 policy. So one of the major changes that we have made in the present policy relates to the fact that there shall be flexibility even for that, and whereas the 3-language formula will be certainly adopted, the adoptability of the 3-language formula doesn't impose Hindi as a language on any state in this country.
Dr. Kasturirangan,
The
the reason why I ask you this
aspect
question, because in
Yes.
that flexibility clause, it says that people, if they want to, go for another language, they may do so after grade 6 or 7. So that's why, the feeling was that this is the ambiguity. That if you have the option or flexibility post grade 6 and 7, what happens before that? Is it mandatory before grade 6?
Oh, I think that I think you should see it in the overall context of the multilingualism and the pluralism of the country. If you want to go after 6th standard, you want to study one more language or change the language, the point is the youngster picks up the ability to use a language between the age 3 and between the age 6. In fact, between the brain development is almost 86% complete by the age 8. So because of that, the language learning ability of the youngster today, as understood by the neural sciences, cognitive sciences and so on, is that you can pick up in the early phase of your childhood many languages can be picked up. Two is not the question, not even 3. There are the inputs that are available, which takes us to even 4 and 5. So that is the capacity of the youngster. Today, we don't look at these kind of languages only with respect to whether it's a local, whether it's applicable for this, or whether there are other considerations. The question is, can the vehicle of language, which is a vehicle of communication, and also in a sense, transmission of the culture between different segments of the society, I think whether we can do this maximum justice by learning more and more languages. The particular clause is all that it made for providing the recognizing this aspect, that you have learned 3 languages. If you want to go to the 4th language, please do so, and at a particular age, since you have already learned 3 languages, you are even better prepared to learn more number of languages in the later phase of your
Dr. Kasturirangan, you are saying that Hindi will be mandatory till grade 6, and only after grade 6 it can be, you can opt for another language. Is that what you are saying?
No, that you have modified that the version that has been inserted is one of the versions that we had approved at the level of the committee. The previous version that was there, which was replaced by this, had this statement of Hindi being learned, which is more akin to the 1968 and 1986 policies. We thought that in the flexibility, since we have made the statement of flexibility, and we thought that this will be the signal that we will give even by this statement will be the flexibility of the choice of the language is the one that will drive the implementation of this particular policy paragraph. But the response that we have, which is after putting it into the website, is that people interpreted that there is an effort to impose Hindi. That is exactly the reason why we should go for a formulation which avoided this kind of a explicit statement, and that is why we brought in the second version. But this is a decision that was made by the committee after the approval by the committee. So I don't think there is any kind of a worry
and you
on
would
the
say
fact
that this is still a draft. This is still a draft,
a little
Dr.
better clarity.
So you're saying this is open to adaptation. This is still a draft.
Yes.
Okay.
Why adapt a draft? You could have waited till June 30th.
It is up to the after the. No. I think this is a particular paragraph which was equivalent to, which was also adopted for the same purpose by the committee, and we found that since the interpretation of the one which is put there really gives a feeling that Hindi is being imposed on the southern states or non-Hindi speaking states, we thought, and after all, in a lifetime of the policy which we worked for 1.5 years, and you just put it into the website, and that date was not sacrosanct. We put it on a particular date. Within a day or two, once we started feeling this kind of a thing, we thought we have an alternate solution, and so that we assure that our thoughts are properly displayed after the public scrutiny of this particular policy should also have that element of making sure that they get the right signal with respect to a particular policy. We thought once we found that is not the right one, this is not a change in the stance. I want to tell you, this is not a change in the stance. It is only the change in the presentation to the public.
Okay, Dr. Kasturirangan, Pallav, please go ahead.
Dr. Rangan, there is a feeling, we worked together for a very long time. I know you're not easy to bend, you're not easy to change things and amend things easily. Were you under some kind of a pressure to make this particular amendment a draft to the draft?
Nothing. In the morning you get up and you find that some of the states in the southern India and other places, we are finding there is a tremendous resentment. I've called some of my very, very valued colleagues, very competent colleagues. We sit together, we debate this, what we should do. They are all members of this committee and also the people who supported this committee. And we discussed the strategy for it, and we thought that we should invoke the alternate version that we have, on which we have the approval, and we simply decided that in order to make sure that our signal is right at that particular point, which is not too late. After all, 48 hours since something has been residing in the website, if you want to put a right one so that you get the right signal, we decided to go ahead with it. It is our decision, our formulation, which has been earlier approved, and there is no pressure. and nobody even called us on phone to tell you that there is a problem.
Okay,
there.
but I want to ask you this question.
Newspapers and other kinds of
Dr. Kasturirangan, the speculation in Tamil Nadu, politically, obviously political in nature, is that you were pressurized in the first place to mention Hindi. See, Pallav asked you a question about pressure to remove the clause. I am saying the pressure to put the clause in the first place.
I say categorically, I told you the procedure we adopted to replace it. I say categorically no to the point that you are trying to say could have happened. It's not there.
Okay, Dr. Kasturirangan, you mentioned that this revision of the clause was with the acceptance of all the committee members. But there is a report in the Indian Express that came on Monday which spoke about Mr. Kuril and Mr. Tiwari not being happy.
Already, Pallav.
Yeah, Dr. Kasturirangan, there is a report in the Indian Express.
First of all, I want to say the version
of Mr. Kuril and Mr. Tiwari not being happy.
Whatever may be the number of paper, I want to tell you what is the. I will tell you exactly what is the situation from my point of view as chairman of this committee. I think if you want to hear that, I will tell you it is the following. We have the two versions, both the versions are approved by the committee. And we had a little problem of communicating through the earlier version. So we switched over to the next version, which we thought will have lesser of that kind of a impression it will give for the purpose for which it was formulated. So we just put it. That is the only story. There is no question of anything else. Both were earlier approved, and everybody in the committee had an approval. They had not objected to any one of these at that particular time. So I can tell you.
So old learnings from ISRO about having redundancies came into the picture? I'm asking you, Dr. Rangan, old learnings from ISRO?
In running this particular, I want to tell you, Pallav, in running this kind of activities, even for 1.5 years, in such a, and the problems being very complex and multidimensional, you need to adopt all kinds of strategies which will make sure that the ultimate goal of giving a country something good and something with in the view of the concerned people are worthwhile. So in doing this, the procedure to how to proceed with it, how to handle it, how to strategize it is something, many of it comes because of the earlier experience of dealing with ISRO. Certainly there are elements of it which have found its way in the way in which we handle this kind of committee.
Dr. Kasturirangan, how would you handle the controversy? You know, let me be specific why I ask you this question. Because parties like the DMK, ADMK, largely parties from the south, not just Tamil Nadu, even other political parties, they say they don't have a problem with just the Hindi clause, but the fact that the three-language policy itself exists in the national education policy. The DMK goes on to say, scrap the three-language policy.
Well, you know, we have reviewed, we went considerable depth with respect to what kind of policy we should adopt and recommend. We find that to have an alternate to a three-language formula earlier, except that giving the flexibility which was not existing in the earlier formula, we may not be able to do anything better. We can certainly say two language is good enough. The current strategy for going for a three-language is we understand the cognitive science and the ability to pick up new languages by the youngsters between the age of 3 and 8. We know it much better than what at the time when the kind of thoughts were given, the earlier policy. We certainly have to make use of those neural science developments, cognitive science development, and this three-language formula is the minimum. It certainly provides the basis for the youngster to pick up even more languages in the years to come. This 3 to 8 years is a very critical thing. Catch hold of that particular window and make sure that the children are taught maximum number of languages.
No, but Dr. Kasturirangan, you know, as a general, let me ask you this question.
Up to them. But equally importantly, what you can comprehend even more number of languages later, you are equipping them. Why not?
Yeah, that's true. I agree with your assessment. You've spoken about this in various interviews, Dr. Kasturirangan. But the point is the very fact that there is an imposition of the language, a language Hindi. The DMK says that you have created, with the help of this amendment, a backdoor entry for the Hindi language. I want to ask you this specific question as a general proposition. You think Hindi should be widely acceptable to all the states, even the non-Hindi speaking states? Is that your assessment?
Why do you want to say only Hindi? Every language which I like, I should be able to accept it and learn it and enjoy it. I don't think there is any issue, any question on that. I don't think, in my view, any state will object to Hindi being available to them as an opportunity to learn. But as a policy, there has been a history with respect to some of the language.
But this policy has existed.
Want to avoid repetition.
I'm sorry, Dr. Kasturirangan, this policy has existed since 1968.
Hello?
I'm saying this policy of 3 languages was adopted since 1968. Yes. There are some states in this country which have not even been able to implement the 2-language policy properly. Do you think we are planning way ahead in time? Yes, we should plan for the future.
Exactly, that is what I am telling you. Exactly what you said is correct. We have not been able to get into even the 3 language. First of all, I should say the 3 language has been implemented in several states and with good success. Number 2, I myself have learned 4 languages in the same period. I didn't find anything difficult in that kind of, because the rules of the game is what I mentioned just a few minutes back. The third aspect is every state has to set up its infrastructure for learning language. Learning language doesn't mean you have some books and you do it. You need good books, quality books, you need infrastructure, you need teachers and many other things. If you review this in the length and breadth of this country with respect to how good the language learning ability is supported by the backup systems that you need, that is where you will get this answer, not on the question of whether somebody is opposing this or somebody is supporting it.
Dr. Kasturirangan, are you going to reject any political pressure? See, there's a lot of talk on whether this Hindi was a political entry into the draft policy and not an academic entry. Will you reject any political pressure? First of all, do you reject it outright?
I want to tell that. I think I again want to tell you, Pallav, we have had no political pressure. This is our judgment and the replacement of one version with another version, so that it gives the correct set of signals to the people who read it. I don't think that there is anything wrong in the logic at all, and that too within 48 hours of putting the previous. We could as well put it 72 hours later, and then another 20 to 48 hours we could have done it. I think what are we talking of in terms of time frame? What is the logic behind this kind of questions? You are trying to put another thing because you saw some reaction somewhere, and this is uncomfortable that a particular thing which is for wrong reason is getting a reaction of this kind. If it is for right reason, certainly you have to defend it or you have to do whatever is to be done.
Dr. Rangan,
this is for wrong reasons.
Dr. Rangan, अगर मैं आपसे पूछ सकूं, आप ये जो पॉलिसी है, इससे आप खुश हैं कि नहीं, जो आपने इस वक्त ड्राफ्ट पॉलिसी हिंदुस्तान को दी है?
Dr. Rangan, so much Hindi is being spoken about in and around this policy.
Yeah.
How's your Hindi?
अच्छा,
सर आप खुश हैं इससे?
जब पल्लव से बात करना है तो हो सकता हूँ मैं रामपुरील से भी कर सकता हूँ, मैं तो काफी बात किया है उनसे. But I don't know whether I am sending the right signals or not. That I can't say.
नहीं, बट हिंदी तो आप बोलते हैं अच्छी.
बताइए.
नहीं, मैं कह रहा हूं आप खुश हैं पॉलिसी से जो आपने इस वक्त पब्लिक डोमेन में डाली है?
इंग्लिश है, आपसे बहुत खुश हूं, because you should read the ones who have read this particular policy in its totality. Just look at Hindu article today. I am sure that you are going to do quite a number of sequence of items in this, and there are many channels waiting to hear the totality of policy and its implication. And it's one of the very comprehensive. I should not try to gloat on this kind of a policy, being the chairman of a committee which has formulated it, but I hear it from many quarters. The quarters which I value because of their intellectual ability and the type of educational background they have. I have no reason to worry at all about the quality of the, and I should say also, because you have been often asking whether there has been this pressure and that pressure, I think this is a policy which has been conceptualized, which has been analyzed, and which has been properly then ultimately put together in the form of this kind of a document. And this is all the work of this committee, a very eminent committee with people like Manjul Bhargav, a field medalist from Princeton University, and many others, and also people who had from other walks of life who served as a peers for this particular. I believe in a peer review of this kind of an activity. It has gone through it, and we had something like 260 consultations with some of the top-notch educationists in this country, and lastly dealt with also 70 organizations which have worked in the area of education in different contexts. So this is the kind of input. Besides, of course, I should remember to say, lot of input came from TSR Subramaniam's report and the MHRD report, and also the previous work which was spread over 3 to 4 years, going virtually to the grassroots level of district and so on and so on. This was an enormous task, but enormous backups are available in terms of the work that was done, and we added new way of looking at it, and I think the outcome of the particular policy certainly is something that we can be all proud of.
Dr. Rangan, do you see, you are known as the rocket scientist and the satellite man of India. Do you think social change, getting social change done, is harder than rocket science?
Yes, I felt so. I felt so. The number of dimensions you have to address in the case of rocket science, I think pales into, don't want to say simple or something. I think in terms of complexity is at much lower level than dealing with a complexity of this type. A successful flight of a rocket will not be immediately subjected to a national debate. You can see the kind of reaction. This is a vibrant society. You should know India. It's a complex society, vibrant, and obviously people would, everyone is dissecting it, every word, every page, every para, every line as it happened just now. I think that is the vibrancy, and that is precisely what we should expect, because more people are going to read it, more people are trying to interpret it, and more people certainly are going to appreciate it, and at the same time we should have the criticism that we justly deserve. I think otherwise, if there is no fun in trying to create this kind of a complex activity in the form of a policy, if we don't have that kind of criticism.
So, Dr. Kasturirangan,
the criticism, a constructive criticism, that's all I want to say.
Would you, Dr. Kasturirangan, as we end this interview, I want to ask you, do you think social change is the new rocket science in your life and otherwise?
Yes, I have gone through transformation. Pallav, you know me from the days of rockets and satellites to the days in which I worked in the parliament, to the days in which I worked with the planning commission, and the days in which I have been out of all these and now got into the public, this kind of a policy related to the education. But I think each one of I should say, in one sense, I was building upon the knowledge of the and the experience of the previous level in trying to do a new job. And I also feel every time in retrospect when I complete a job that was much more complex than the previous one. And the engineering, this policy of education is no different in that particular order of complexity priorities in my way of doing things over the last 50 years.
All right. Dr. Kasturirangan, appreciate you joining us, and also our science editor here at NDTV, Pallav Bagla. This was an absolutely engaging interview. We learnt a lot, at least from the people who drafted this policy. Thank you so much, Dr. Kasturirangan. And here's hoping that this controversy dies down so that you can carry on with your social change, which is now your new rocket science. Thank you so much. So that's the end of this special broadcast. We'll continue our...
Thank you so much, Pallav. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.